Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Uh, Let me first welcome you all to the winter school. Um, so CD is being organized this kind of winter schools. Last more than a decade, we have been holding the winter schools. The winter school is largely being arranged in such a way the young scholars are being encouraged to participate, and eminent scholars in the field give their lectures in detail on their respective fields. So this the center that holding these winter schools is serving as an adjunct research unit of the Department of Economics, Delhi University. So in these winter schools, the last couple of years, we managed to get eminent scholars, including Nobel laureate, and each year a dedicated group of our colleagues took the responsibility to hold this kind of schools successfully. Last 2 years, we could not hold the schools on face-to-face mode, where we did it in virtual mode. And now this years onwards, we started holding face-to-face mode. Now it has been quite difficult or challenging task for the team who were conducting these winter schools to get sponsorship, so that you could facilitate, you can subsidize your stay, your activities. But finally, they managed to get some kind of assistance to run these winter schools. I would encourage you to take part actively throughout the school, 4-day winter schools. And if any of the lectures to be delivered and the pressure paper to be presented gives some kind of interest, and you carry forward that kind of research for your futures, the winter school will be successful. And with that note, I would like to invite Director, the Delhi School of Economics, Professor Pami, and Head of Department of Economics, to say a few words. Do you need any help about the managing the schools and all?
I don't think so, but if I need that, ask you.
A very good morning to everyone here. I extend a warm welcome to our eminent speakers, esteemed delegates, and all participants of Winter School 2022 to this magnificent temple of learning, the Delhi School of Economics. I am also honored and privileged to welcome you to the distinguished parent institution of the Delhi School of Economics, the University of Delhi, which is celebrating its momentous existence of 100 years. The University of Delhi was founded on May 1st, 1922, with 3 colleges and 750 students. Now, a century later, the university includes 90 colleges, 16 faculties, 86 departments, and almost 7 lakh students.
So how is
It is a matter of great pride that over the last 100 years of its glorious presence, the university has emerged as an institution of great eminence. We at the Delhi School of Economics are privileged to be a part of this institution of eminence. The motto of the University of Delhi, Nishtha Dhriti Satyam, translated to English, signifies dedication, steadfastness, and truth. The motto of the Delhi School of Economics, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamaya, denotes, may the light of knowledge remove the darkness of ignorance. Both these mottos reflect the foundation of the Delhi School of Economics. The Delhi School of Economics was established in 1949 as a center for advanced learning and research in the social sciences, with India's first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, as its president, and Professor V.K.R.B. Rao as its founder director. Our founder's dream was to set up an institution devoted to research and teaching in economics and allied areas in the social sciences that would play an important role in the economic development and social progress of the country. His aim was to train technically competent economists and at the same time instill in them social consciousness so that they serve society with sincerity and commitment. The Delhi School of Economics currently comprises the departments of economics, geography, and sociology of the University of Delhi. India's premier library in the social sciences, the Ratan Tata Library, is also located here. The Department of Economics is the oldest and biggest department of the Delhi School of Economics and is considered to be one of Asia's top-ranking center for excellence in postgraduate teaching and research. For the 9th successive year, it has been ranked the highest amongst university economics departments in India by REPEC, a global electronic archive of working papers and publications in economics. The Center for Development Economics is the research arm of the Department of Economics. In the words of the founder director, Professor V.K.R.B. Rao, after all, there are many universities, but only one Delhi School of Economics. With this, I welcome you once again to Winter School 2022, as well as to the Delhi School of Economics. Thank you very much. And I now request Professor Surender Kumar, Head of the Department of Economics, to say a few words.
So very good morning to all and our eminent speakers, delegates. It's a matter of great pleasure to welcome you on this winter school. This year winter school holds a special significance in the life of the department as well as the university. This year's winter school is of special significance given that the university is celebrating its 100 years of academic excellence. And this year is also the 80th year of the establishment of the department. Taking the legacy of this last 2 decades, the department is holding its winter school almost for last 2 decades. So in this series, this year we have eminent invited speakers, Professor Aldo Rustichini of University of Minnesota. So welcome, Aldo. We have this year Michael Greenstone of University of Chicago. We have Bruce Hansen, University of Wisconsin-Madison. We have Rolf Bucicini of Rennes School of Business. So we are very happy to welcome you all. And in these 4 days, I'm sure that this will be a great learning experience to us. And also we will get some new ideas, new ways of working. And I'm sure this will be very productive 4 days. And if you have any concerns, please let me know. So again, I welcome you all on this Winter School 2022. Welcome.
With that, I conclude the inaugural sessions. Two small request: when the speakers will be presenting something, please mute your mobile and then try to attend not only the plenary sessions, also the sessions, the parallel sessions where the presenters will be making the presentations. With that, we conclude the inaugural sessions. So hand it over to Sudhir. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to the first session of the Winter School. It's a pleasure to welcome and introduce Professor Aldo Rustichini of the University of Minnesota, who is a leading economic theorist in a long line of distinguished scholars who have lectured at the Winter School over the years. Professor Rustichini has quite an interesting and unusual academic background. He read philosophy as an undergraduate, studied economics for his master's degree, and finally earned his doctorate in mathematics. To many people, including me, that probably seems like the ascent of man. He has taught at a number of leading economics departments, including Northwestern, NYU, the Catholic University of Louvain, Tilburg, Boston, Cambridge, and finally, Minnesota. Among many other honors, he is a fellow of the Econometric Society. Professor Rustichini's research spans an exceedingly wide spectrum. It ranges from traditional areas of economic theory, such as decision theory, game theory, general equilibrium theory, political economy, and dynamics, to relatively newer and emerging areas such as behavioral economics, experimental economics, and finally, neuroeconomics. I suspect the biological foundations in the lecture titles will concern the last mentioned area. I must confess that I'm not very familiar with neuroeconomics, and I hope to learn about it from his lectures. Nevertheless, here are my priors leading into the lectures. Economists traditionally model economic phenomena by treating various aspects of the world as exogenous variables that describe a given environment. A short list of possible environmental parameters would include political and other institutional structures, technology, and most importantly, preferences. Now, the modeling of preferences is typically guided by two often conflicting criteria. While Occam's razor demands the greatest possible generality, pragmatism demands tractability. The trade-off is usually judged on the basis of words like intuition, analytical convenience, and the interestingness of the results. I expect Professor Rustichini will be using neurological data, I imagine brain studies, to shed light on the foundations of preferences and our strategies for modeling preferences. Of particular interest would be the description of types in game theory. If that is indeed the agenda, some immediate questions arise that you might want to mull over during or after the talks. First, do we need to peer into brain chemistry and physics to characterize a type or private information? Second, are such inferences possible, feasible? 3, is such data necessary or sufficient for the purposes of useful and interesting economic modeling? But let me not stand in the way of the lecture anymore. Once again, Professor Rustichini, we all warmly welcome you to the Winter School and await your lectures with keen interest.
Thank you. So do I start? Good morning. You can hear me, right? Good. So this is the title, Economics with the Biological Foundation. Can you see well? No? You know, okay. You have to see well. I have things I've written very small characters. So after my talk, maybe some of you will wonder, why is this economics? In fact, this is not how economics is today. but this is what economics should be, in my opinion. And if I may be even more bold, if economics doesn't look like this in 20 years, economics will not be useful anymore. That's my approach. I'll have three opportunities to talk to you. In the first one, I will give you a broad overview of what this object is. In the second and the third, I will go more in detail on two of the topics that I outlined. So, general consideration to start with. Economics as a science has changed a lot, at least in the last 20 years. And now we are at the crossroads and we need to evaluate how to proceed. I think this is not just something that we need to do as scientists. We need to do because most of the important policy issues that we discuss depend on the answers we give to the questions that we analyze today. So I think this change of view is important not only because it's a scientific change of perspective, but also because it affects the answers we give to the issues that matter to us. I am, by background, a lot of stuff, but I'm originally someone who was very much involved in politics. I came into life with idealistic views. I changed my mind on the substance, but the idealistic views are still there. And I think one needs to have a clear idea of what he has to say before he speaks. You understand what I'm saying? You are young, you're happy. You should keep this in mind. You can do many mistakes. You can waste, as I did, 9 years of your life doing stupid things. Don't waste 9 years of your life doing stupid things. Just try to get the right answer immediately. It's better. So there are three changes that are important. One is new economics. Can you still hear me? Yeah. The other one is genetics and economics, and the third one is personality theory. That is related to what are types in games. Okay? There is now a scientific way to approach the issue of what is a type. And a type has to be described in terms of the characteristic of every individual. If you don't know what I mean, think intelligence of a person is important to define what the individual is. So it's an important component of what he is as a type. There are other characteristics. So as economists, we consider some of them. There are others that are coming from psychology. So the starting point is really this. We have to start thinking of man as having a nature, and the nature of my nature is different from his nature, I mean, our characteristics. And the foundation of that characteristic is here in the genetic, at least in part. And the way in which genetics describes personality is coming through neuroeconomics. So all these three themes, although they are very different, they are all interrelated. And you will see, if you're smart, what the relationship is. Okay, so these are the three revolutions. The three innovations, if you have questions, please ask, because it's a bit complicated, so I don't want to lose anybody. So I'll try to give you a broad overview of these three things. Neuroeconomics. So neuroeconomics is a discipline that studies, as it's a neural basis of economic and strategic behavior. So whatever decision we take has to go through our head. And now we begin to understand how the process operates. So neuroeconomics is usually identified with, you just scan the brain and see what happens in the brain while you're taking decision. It's that, but it's not only that. It's done with functional magnetic resonance imaging, but also done from recording from single neurons, EEG and MEG. There are many tools that one can use. The tools are not important. What is important is the concept that we want to understand the process that produces choices. Is that clear? There are other components, for instance, hormonal one. From the genetic point of view and from the hardware point of view, there is not much difference between a man and a woman. There is a lot of difference from this point of view. Okay? So that's what it is. Here is a list of, so you may say, okay, so good, but why is it useful? So here is a list of things that may sound mysterious to you now, and I will try to explain them. So these are the things that I think we understand much better now after 20 years. And I'll give you a list. I'll read you this list. This is a list of examples, but I think as the most important examples. One is maybe you know what the value function is. It's the way in which we think of dynamic programming in time. And we usually reduce to the Bellman equation to the decision between what is optimal today plus a discount of the continuation value. It looks like an abstract mathematical concept. To my amazement, at the end of, let's say, beginning of this millennium, around 97 to 2000, people started to produce results. This from single neuron recording in monkeys that was showing that the value function, the Bellman equation, is really implemented in the brain. And you can see how it works. That was the thing that really shocked me. Yes. Oh, no, we don't have free will. We don't have free will. We don't have free will. I don't reconcile. I mean, you know, this is a very difficult question. Okay, let me sidestep this. It's a very difficult question. I invite philosophers to study. People have studied it. They have concluded nothing. Why is it important? But can we go? I mean, this is a very important issue. I'm happy to discuss it. Let's get. I want to deal with it. So now there are formal models, Q-learning that implement this, but really what is important is that you can see in the brain how the value function is updated at every stage. Wonderful, don't you think? Second, neural basis of choice between options. So as economists, we are trained to think, yeah, I present you with two options, you compute the utility of one, of the other, you choose the maximum. Okay. This is not as simple as this. The process is much more complicated. And now we have evidence of how this computation, you choose the maximum, is done in the brain. And it's even more interesting when I don't describe to you, I present you with lottery A and lottery B, but I don't tell you really what is the probability of having an outcome with lottery A and lottery B. You have to learn it. So there are models now that they are based on diffusion processes, is the diffusion model. As models, they are not very interesting. They become a lot more interesting when you understand that it describes approximately well the process that takes place in the brain when you make a choice. So that's the richer models that we will describe. Third, which is getting close to what people call behavioral economics. Oh, I am not a behavioral economist. People think, I don't know why people think I'm behavioral. I'm not a behavioral economist. I'm not particularly sympathetic to the project of behavioral economics. I'll have a slide on this. It's a different point of view. But anyway, there is a phenomenon that is adaptation to the environment. Of course, I mean, you know, right? If you go into a dark room, no, if you are outside, there's a light here, there's a very bright light. Then you go into a dark room, for about 15 seconds, you don't see anything, right? Everybody knows this. You don't need science to know this. And why is that? Because you go from an environment brightly lit to an environment not lit, and you have to adjust. And of course, you know what the adjustment is, that you have an intensity of light which is much stronger outside, so the retina has to adjust. The retina and cerebral processes have to adjust. So, of course, your sensory, your perceptual system is adjusted to the environment in which you find yourself. You may say, this is obvious. And it is obvious. I mean, visual perception is really obvious. Something similar happens in choice and in reward processing. And now we're beginning to understand how it works. So this, I will devote a lot of time to this. Now, once we do that, then we can understand how important it is. So this is crucial. So let me elaborate on this. Everybody, you know, if you stick a straw in a glass of water, say, you know that the stick appears to be broken, right? When you are 3 years old, you discover this phenomenon. I mean, I remember my son when he saw this thing for the first time and took it out. Oh, it's not broken. Put it back. Oh, it's broken. That's another example of bias induced by visual perception and by the mechanism in which visual perception operates. Great. So we have biases. Do we have a department or a ministry of visual perception correction? We don't. I'm trying to say that even if there is a distortion in visual perception, we are usually pretty good at adjusting to it. So even if I know that if you show me a straw, and I think it looks to me that it's broken, and so I really shouldn't trust my visual perception, I still go out in the street and I'm pretty confident that I will not be run over by a bus. Do you agree with this? This is crucial because there are some people that say, since you are, I'm extrapolating, okay, but I don't think it's unfair. Since you don't perceive correctly a straw, you need someone that guides you. This second implication does not follow. Okay? I don't need someone to guide me in the street because I have a small bias in visual perception. Is it clear? This is very important, very important. So that's what I mean by comparison with anomalies of visual perception. So it's important to understand how big the effect is and how long it lasts. So you know by experience that you go into a room that is dark, it takes you 10 seconds, and in those 10 seconds, you have learned by experience that you better be careful when you move around the room because you might hit your toe with something if you don't see it. That's the extent of the adjustment that is needed. And then neural basis of important emotions, regret, and empathy. That's one thing we understood. Is it clear? No questions? So let me give. So I give you an example. So this is now a piece of history. This is like looking at Marshall Lesher's principles. It's a piece of history. But it's a very important slide. This is Schultz dying. So to understand what, I'll spend 2 minutes because this is really beautiful. This is what convinced me that we couldn't keep writing Bellman equation like without understanding what it was. So I think there is a monkey that is observing something on a screen. Ignore this for the moment. You will see in a moment what this. So you should see these dots. They are on a line. So I mean, this is one line. This is another one. This is what happens in a trial, and each dot is a neuronal spike. Okay. So as you know, or you should know, neuron can only do one thing: either 0 or 1, either the spike or the non-spike. When you see a dot, there is a spike. Is it clear? So that tells you, so it tells you that here there was a spike, here nothing, then another spike, then another spike, okay? And you do it many times, and then you add vertically, and you had, when you add vertically, you have this. Is it clear? So this top line is the vertical addition of what you have in the rows. Clear? No, these are the same neuron. So you stick an electrode in the head of a monkey. Yes, of a certain type. Is that okay? So this monkey is looking at the screen. So this monkey is getting along, nothing happens, nothing happens. Then all of a sudden, she or he is delivered the reward. And you see, and there is a little bit of spikes here. And then you do it again, and there is, okay? When you sum up, you see here, you see? Here there is a piling up. So this graph is, this picture is telling you when I show you suddenly that you don't expect a reward, the neuron in the reward area is spiking at a faster rate. These are Poisson processes. So as the appearance of the reward makes it spike faster than it was before. Okay? So this is, what is a neuron? It's an elementary cell in the brain. And so our brain is made out by billions of neurons. They are all interrelated, and they're a computing machine. So our brain and our emotional life is the outcome of a network of neurons, and each neuron can only do one thing, either 1 or 0. This is when there is no conditional stimulus, no conditioned stimulus. So it's a surprise. Now, to the same monkey, at some point, let's say 10 seconds before the delivery of the reward, I show something irrelevant, a triangle on the screen. And then slowly the monkey learns that 10 seconds after that triangle, it will receive a reward. Is it clear? So the expectation of the reward is now adjusted to the point in time in which you really acquire this information. So, you can think, if you want to think of this mathematically, it's a filtration here and information after I teach you a conditioned stimulus. At this point, at this S less than T, you learn that you're going to receive a reward. So for practical purposes, the reward is given to you at this point. And so you see what happens? Isn't this beautiful? The firing lamps here now. So, yes, so there is a machine that calls rewards and calls the rewards at the appropriate time. When it's a surprise, the appropriate time is here. When it's no longer a surprise, it shifts here. This is, if you think of the Bellman equation, this is what, if you write it in terms of Q learning, that's what we do when we write the equation. The brain is doing this equation. Do you understand? I mean, this is, to me, what I say, okay, we have to stop doing economics as we have been doing, and we have to do this. Because that's really how we do things. Fantastic paper. I mean, it's a benchmark. Okay, then you can play with it. You can give, at this point, a conditioned stimulus. So you say, hey, look, you're going to go to get a reward. 10 seconds later, you don't get the reward. And now look, now it goes down. Because now it's a negative adjustment, right? It's like in the prediction error of the Q learning, you have less than you expect. So translating into mathematical terms, Q learning is the adjustment of a value function plus an adjustment term times the prediction error. The prediction error here is shifted to this time. Here it becomes negative because I failed to deliver you the reward. I think once you see this, you understand that you have to understand this process. Okay. Another example. I'll do this more in detail in the next class. Now we understand neural basis of choice among options is a network of neurons that are organized in subnetworks. Each of these networks is doing something. I will explain what it does. And this complex interactions produces the choice. So now you have a model. Then you will see we have neural data. Now we can compare the choice data and the neural data using this model. And I have a model that predicts both neural data and choice data. It's not Skinner, but it's really Pavlov, and it's really that. That's the idea, yes. Well, Pavlov understood an element of the adjustment. I mean, we know a lot more. Oh, come on, in 100 and more years, we should have learned. Okay, this is the adjustment, the adaptive coding. I'll go into this picture. The key point is this: I can put you in a room which is brightly lit or poorly lit, and this graph is showing. Okay, I can put you in a brightly lit and in a not brightly lit room. You know that somewhere in the brain has to adjust something, and the adjustment is the change in slope of your retinal response, say, to the stimulus. That's what you think happens. That is indeed what happens if you look at the data. And we have to do two things. One, to have a good theory of what this slope adjustment is. Second, why on earth are we doing that? And so we have to ask the question of whether it is optimal to do that. And I'll show you that it is. And third, the question that I was mentioning earlier, we have to understand how important the bias is. Third, regret and envy. That's something I like because really it's an idea I think is great. So, you know, regret. I wish I had done something. It looks like a stupid emotion. Why on earth do you have regret? If you think about it, regret is simply counterfactual thinking. That is, you do something, then you see the outcome, and then you may go back and do the counterfactual estimation. Was it a good idea to choose what I did? And of course, if that is once in a lifetime, regret is really stupid. But if you have several opportunities to make the choice, regret is very useful because it's teaching you on the basis of the outcome you received, whether the action you took was good or not. Okay, so regret looks like a stupid emotion, is not, is an essential component of learning through the counterfactual exercise. What if I had done something else? How would I have, how would the outcome be different for me? So it's, again, the idea is you find something that looks irrational and you understand why it's there. Okay, this is also interesting, I think. So the regret is based on this idea. Oh, I did this choice. It didn't turn out to be a very good choice. I wish I had done something. Think of the situation in which you did the choice and your friend did the other choice. And he performs better than you. It's really the same thing. You feel envy. But you see, envy is simply the fact of, oh, Mark, whatever his name is, did better than me, so I envy him. And it's really the same thing as I feel regret because I did something, I could have done something else. That is the explanation of this sentence. Envy is the social correspondent of regret. As you learn, let me summarize, as you learn counterfactually that you could have done something better, you can learn counterfactually that you could have done something better following the example of another guy. Is it clear? Envy, Envy is usually, envy is not a good emotion, but we have it and has not been selected away because it has this learning aspect in social environments. So we ran an experiment, we show that it is. So the experiment really, you see this is really saying, oh, I'm really mad. Okay, this is the brain that is not activated. And it's the expression of how mad you are. And how mad you are is the strongest when you use the social comparison and it's different. So this is what your brain does when you chose something. The other chose something else, he did better than you. Boom. The brain records this as profound disappointment or envy. I don't want to defend envy. I'm just saying it's there for a reason. It doesn't go away because of a reason. So bottom line, we understood two things. And we have done two things. One is replacement of as if, you understand the expression as if model, Friedman, 1950 methodology of positive economics. I'll get there in a moment. I want to finish this. So the as if idea is we need a model and it doesn't matter whether the model is correct or not. Yeah, he says this in so many words. It doesn't matter. The important is that it gives good prediction. I think that's profoundly wrong. This philosophical attitude is profoundly wrong. It does matter to understand how things work, because eventually you will be able to make prediction of the sample only if you understand how the process works. So we replaced the as if model with mechanistic model. Yes. Yeah, sure. So this experiment, for instance, is based to study regret. One essential manipulation is always the same. Sometimes I show you what you could have gotten. Sometimes I don't. You understand this? So yes, and in fact, when I don't show you, let me be concrete. The experiment works like this. I present you with two lotteries, A and B, okay? You choose A. The complete information treatment is I show you the outcome of A and B. The incomplete feedback is I show you the outcome of A, which is the one you chose. I don't show you the outcome of B. This model of regret tells you that your response and the brain response is going to be different in the two cases. Is that okay? So that's an important motivation. Very good question, but that's how we study regret. Yes, that's what we do. Yeah, that's our job. And this is philosophically very important. Philosophically. When I say philosophically, I mean, it's a general thing. We are replacing. As economists, we tend to think that our choices is optimal. Are not the choices which are optimal, but it's the process that is producing choice which is optimal. It's the only thing that evolution selection can control. Evolution and selection cannot come and say, oh, do I choose this college degree or this other college degree? It can only teach you how to cope with variable environment. So is this important? Is this clear? I mean, this is this is a half empty, half full glass. Behavioral economists hate the idea that we have something optimal anyway. A classical economist may say, well, but our choice is optimal. No, choice is not always optimal, because what we really can choose is the process that is leading to choice. And that has to be optimal because selection and learning will operate at that level. Is the difference clear? Yes.
Process is with reference to optimality of final choices or some other metric?
Yeah.
Time you take or
Good. In the models, we tend, so I put you in an environment and a choice environment. And the hypothesis that we formulate as model and we test in experiments is that the process that you select is going to be optimal in the sense that it will maximize expected value, say. If you want to be more sophisticated, but really, believe me, it doesn't change much, you maximize expected utility. But since we always deal with small stakes, there is not much difference. So the optimality criterion is you choose, oops, still alive. You choose a process and you get the maximum expected utility from that process. Is that clear? I'm going back. I'm okay. So that concludes the first part. Any questions? Any more questions? So I don't know. I hope I'm communicating some of my obvious enthusiasm for this stuff. Yes.
People encounter different processes and choose the sort of optimal one for its state of
So it's not the human that chooses, right? It's the species. And so it's a different level. So when I say species, I mean, of course, this thing is hardwired. So it's eventually controlled by some genetic component. Maybe there is a part of social learning that eventually is also hardwired. But anyway, these are two processes. One is selection in the sense of modification of the distribution of genotype, and another one is learning in the sense hardwiring in a neural process, which is not the choice of an individual. So when I say you choose the process, I'm really talking like the engineer behind the back that is choosing. So I'm really asking the following question. If you were an engineer and I asked you, please, I will have to trust the process you give me. Which one do you choose for me? And he will choose the best for you, given the distribution of rewards in the environment. Is that okay? So that's the philosophy I have in mind. So it's really not you choosing. And of course, the engineer is society, God, selection process.
So process rather than the dynamic compared to the
Yeah. So dynamic in two senses, right? I'm sorry, that was the question. So dynamic in two senses. One is within the process, in the sense that the process itself is dynamic because your choices adjust. And then the other one that is more complex that I was describing a moment ago, that is the selection process. Something of our nature. In the second lecture, I will try to describe to you how in the last 10,000 years, 14,000 years, since we changed from foragers to farmers, our process has changed. Because the genetic has changed. Is it? Second, genoeconomics is the discipline that studies genetic basis of economic and strategic behavior, has really entered into a revolution. This one is seriously a revolution after the year 2000, when with the Human Genome Project, we got a complete description of the human genome. So at the risk of offending someone, I will explain some basic concepts because I will need them. Maybe you know them, then you will be bored. Maybe you don't know, it will be interesting, but I need to be sure we all know what we are talking about. Is that okay? So that's our genome. So these are, as you know, 2 chromosomes. Each one has 2 strands. But you should know that one of the strands is completely irrelevant, so you can ignore it because the pairing is with the 4 nucleotide A, T, G, and C, and A is always paired with T, and G is always paired with C. So once I give you this list, you can reconstruct by yourself the other one, because wherever you find the T, you know that in the other is an A, okay? So that's the real structure, but so the first simplification that you have to do in your mind is that there is only one strand in one chromosome and another strand in the other chromosome. Okay, so first simplification you have to do in mind is that I have two strands, one coming from the father, one coming from the mother. Good. Second thing, in most, so this is a position, this is another position, and so on. They go on for billions. Most of them, all humans have the same. Let's fix on the green strand, okay? So we know that the other can be. All people have an A. All people have an A here. All people have a G here. So that's not a polymorphism. Polymorphism means several shapes in Greek. So that's not, in all these positions, there is no variation among humans. I and he have the same. In few positions, about 1/300, there is a variation. So for instance, and so there is a variation, for instance, there may be a difference between the one that is coming from your father and the one that is coming from your mother. So for instance, you see T here. Remember, T is saying that you have a T and an A, yeah? So here you have a T and here you have a C. That's a polymorphism. At the level of a nucleotide single, so this is single nucleotide polymorphism, that means that we humans are in few, but still a lot if you put them all together, variability. So I may have a T and I may have a C. That's the basic idea. Is it clear? Okay, so then you have the data. You have a data, for instance, so it looks complicated, but let's I mean, it's a section, okay? So let's look at this. So here you have the chromosome number. As you know, we have 23 of them. So this is chromosome 16, for instance. This is the position of the single nucleotide. So this thing is marked at some position. A position may affect a gene. This is a gene, green 2A. Note that there are 3 positions at least which influence the same gene. So an SNP is not a gene. Okay, a gene may have different. In this case, for instance, there are at least 3. What is a gene? A very good question. A gene is really a string of alleles. An allele is one of these positions. Why triplex? I mean, pairs. So a gene is a very, let's say, from here to here. I'm making this up. From here to here is a gene, and has a single nucleotide polymorphism. So my gene is different from yours because and only because we differ at some position. So let's see, for instance, this green 2A gene is affected by these 3 alleles. And so you have, so for instance, this is, oh, okay. These are the data for different subjects. So let's assume the convention that if you have a T, if you have 1 T and 1 C, I give you 1. If you have none, I give you 0. If you have 2, I give you 2. Okay, so it's the number of T's that you have. Then for convenience, we divide by 2. So it's rather than 0, 1, and 2, is 0, 1/2, and 1. Okay? And so if I give you the complete list of whether, so you see, if I see a 0, I already know that you have CC. This guy instead has a half, so I know that he has C and T in that position. Is it clear? This guy has TT. Is it clear? 1 TT. This one has TC, this one has TT, the one has TT. So I can reduce each one of you to a very long list of 0, 1/2, and 1. That's what genetic does. Again, for the positions in which are relevant, that is, for which there is a difference between me and him. Okay, so now look, we can check what this string is for every individual. Now, for every individual, we have an information, say, on whether you has college or not. And then we can do this very brutal thing. I can run a univariate regression, millions. That's the way of doing it. Now it's done a bit better, but basically there is that. I can run regression for each subject. So for instance, let's take this position. And here I will have an additional variable, which is whether this subject has college, this subject has college, and so on. And then I can run a logit of whether he has college or not on this independent variable. I will get a coefficient, and that is my estimate of the effect of this SNP on the probability of getting college. Is the idea clear? That's what an association study does. You regress a dependent variable of interest, let's say college, on a very long list of variables that describe your genetic characteristic at each position. You get a coefficient that is the GWAS coefficient for that characteristic or phenotype. Is the idea clear? What is? So you add control variables, which are sex, age, and then an error. An error. So this is really the broad idea, right? And then there is many adjustments that you have to make. There is an error term that can catch environment, personal history. Is that what you're asking? If you have the original data now, this is done with lasso. So it's but I'll give you the basic idea. Yes. So you see now you can study the genetic basis of whether you get college or not. People at this point start to become very nervous. What are we doing here? I mean, one thing is to study prostate cancer, but this sounds dangerous. Yes. So let's stick to this. RS 9100 is a specific position in the gene. What are my data? My data are for subject 1 that he has 0, for subject 2 that is a 0, for subject 3 that is a half, subject 4 that is a half. Okay? Now, where was it? I'll get this one. Now, suppose that you find that these two people don't have college, and these two people have college. What do you guess? That this position is somehow conducive to a higher probability of getting college. How? We don't know. But that's what we find. So my data are, if I had only this information, of course it would be crazy to do it, but I'm making a thought experiment. The data are, I have either 0 for no college or 1 for college, for this subject, this subject, this subject, this subject. And I run a logic, and I get the coefficient. Can be positive, can be negative. So in my silly example, it was positive because these two people were more likely to have college. So this good gene, if it was negative, bad gene. I'm simplifying, but that's the idea. Then you have to be careful about 1.5 million things. Linkage is equilibrium, stratification. There's a lot of stuff, but that's the basic idea. Yes, that was a question? No? Doesn't change over time. That's what you have, man. The moment you're conceived, that's it. Yeah, so these are large data. The sample size for the last educational attainment study was 3 million subjects. Yes, very good question. I'll try to maybe I'll do it now. As part of the presentation, I'll show you how you can insert this in a standard Becker-Thomas model. Becker-Thomas, yeah, and you'll see how it works.
Has people accused you of being organic, studying organic?
Origin.
Organic. This is going to organic, right?
What is eugenics? I don't know. What is eugenics? What is eugenics? I have no idea. What is eugenics, guys? I don't know. No, it's not.
What practiced by Hitler.
You know, I can't believe. So I have a paper in which I notice, I have a paper going around. I notice that if you study the profile of intelligence in the UK universities from 1960 to 2000, it so happens that with the progressive, as access to the university becomes easier, okay, I'll try this on you. As the access to the university in England between 1960 and 2000, as this access has become easier, what do you think happens to the level of intelligence of people who are in college? Please give me an answer. Who thinks it's going up? You think it's going up? He thinks it's going down. Why? Anybody disagrees with him? So he's going down. Yeah, okay. So I will display, I go around. But you must know that the expansion of the university in the 1960s, I was telling you, was based on an analysis of Robbins in the Robbins report that was based on the following idea. We can expand access to the university and we will be able to pick very smart people in the less privileged sectors of our society, and the level of intelligence in the university will not only not go down, but will go up. When I was young, I believed this stuff. So if you believe this stuff, I can sympathize with you. When I was young and stupid, but now you learn and you say, well, on average, it's likely to go down. So now we go with this paper and say it went down. First reaction is, well, that's obvious. What do you mean it's obvious? The whole idea was that it was not obvious. First. Second, eugenics. Where is eugenics coming from? I mean, I understand why you are saying this. But no, I'm not saying eugenics. I'm just stating do we ignore the fact? I mean, it's a fact there. If some crazy guy wants to do eugenics, okay, do eugenics. We'll try to stop you from doing it. But, okay.
No, I'm not actually.
Ignorance. One of the last things I like of Karl Marx was he saying ignorance has not helped anybody ever. So let's not be ignorant. I mean, we are grown-ups, right? So blah, blah, we do GWAS. This summarizing what I said, in other words. So, okay, so, you can look at data there. You can go and see. This was the first SNP. You can see it has a C and a G. You can study this thing. It's really fascinating. Oh, the next thing I want to do is this. So what is the introduction of the idea of the polygenic score? The basic idea is this. I have a very long list of SNPs. I have for each of these SNPs a coefficient that is telling me how likely you are, say, to achieve college. And then, so I have, at the bottom, I have a very long list of coefficients, which are they are true for the entire population. And I have a very long list of SNPs, one for each subject. Okay? And this link, for each subject, I have a sequence of 0 in the product 0, 1/2, and 1. I can take the inner product of this, and I get the number, and that's your score. That's the idea, okay? I mean, I can present this here, but you're smart guys. That's all you do when you do the polygenic score. Plus, again, a million adjustments. You have to be very careful. So, to summarize, this is okay. So a genome-wide association study is the study I was telling you that does the logic regression and gives you the coefficients. And then, for instance, the phenotype can be educational attainment. And then you can compute the polygenic score for each individual, which is the genetic, the probability risk or of a phenotype of having educational attainment, say college, on the basis of the individual genotype, which is the list of values 0, 1.5, and 1, and the GWAS estimated coefficients. Blah, blah. Okay, so that's a very simple formula, just this. It's the inner product of the beta. This is beta, which is for everybody, and this is for a subject, for an individual. Each individual has a different gene. Okay, so that's what who was asking. We did this. So this is the Becker and Thomas. So this is a paper now is forthcoming GP. We brought all these to analyze issues of mobility with respect to your parents and college achievement using the polygenic score. So the theory is very simple. We take, we take a very standard intergenerational mobility. Everything in this case is standard. Okay, so don't spend time. It's just a standard Becker-Thomas. I don't know. You know Becker-Thomas is parental investment. Parental investment is the idea. There are parents who are altruistic and decide how much they invest in the education of their son or children, because we have twins data. So they decide how much they invest in the family. This is the household life, which depends on their income. And then the human capital of the twin J in family I is the parental investment, an error term, and then a skill term, which is the skill of the individual. That's the standard Becker model. Becker, Thomas Becker. The only thing, you don't see it maybe, but this is in red. This is the only thing we change. And we change it because in the standard Becker model is an AR1. And we say, no, this thing is really the polygenic score. And so it follows laws that are very clear now. And if you don't use those laws, you're an idiot, because science now has progressed. So this was very good at the time of Becker. This is not good anymore. You agree with me? We know how this theta progresses. Why should we use this? For instance, this theta is probably related to parents' theta. And if we know that I have two twins, and these are identical twins, then the theta is going to be the same. If they are not identical twins, there is going to be half. There is to be a correlation of half. So I can use all this information. But now, that's what was done with twin study. Now we even know the theta. So think of replacing the theta with the polygenic score. And now you have a different model, much better, much richer, and you should use that. Is that, do you agree with me that is a reasonable thing to do? Okay, and now you have a complicated model, but okay, I don't want to go into detail. So, I mean, the law of genetic transmission are known. Right? I mean, you use those. So you plug them in and you define a stochastic process, you can study its properties. But now you have to give me two pieces of theory, which now are becoming important, is how are the parents associated? So is you match an intelligent mother with an intelligent father? Usually that's the case. But so that means that the process of putting together the two genes is not, it cannot be an AR1, right? I mean, there are a gazillion assumptions here. Each one of them is blatantly false. There is no sex in this equation. But even if you put sex, there is no way of there is no description of how the theta of the mother and the theta of the father are combined. And anyway, it doesn't pay to make up a theory of how the two thetas are combined because we know how they are combined. They are given to us by the law of genetics. So we use all that.
And what are we trying to predict the final impact of outcome?
We are trying to understand the following. We know, so in our data, we know what is the coefficient of income, of the income elasticity between parents and children. We want to understand how much this is decided by the education that you give to your children, the income that you have in the family, and so the parental investment, and the genetic of the parents. That's what we want, okay? So the first two you do, for the third one, you really need the information about the genetics of the children and of the parents. So in the data set that we use, the Minnesota Twins data, we have all this information. We have information on the genetic of the parents and genetic of the children. So we can study this process. But if you really want a complete model, you also have to decide what is the stable matching. I mean, because you have to decide how parents are, how the pair of parents results. And it's usually a combination complex of the income of the two and the genetics of the two, the personality of the two. For instance, it's well known that the intelligence of the parents is highly correlated. And that, of course, has nothing to do with it. It's the way in which the matching process occurs. So we do all that. We create a complicated model where the genetic is part, and then we enrich it with a notion of stable matching. And so you describe a nonlinear, very complicated stochastic process, and you study the invariant measurement. Okay, and then I'll show you one thing that you can derive. Yes.
Is genetic prototype something which can be changeable from outside? Because, or is it, our idea is that if it's on the right hand, if it's not on the right hand side, then the estimates might not be very accurate. And therefore, we are putting it on the right hand side so that we get more informed estimates of other variables, which can be policy implement, like which can be changed.
Yeah, so you can, that's what the paper I was describing earlier is doing on the England of the 1960s. And so institutions change the link between your genetic endowment and your college outcome. So if I think of whatever is determined by your genetic profile and some string of latent variables, let's say your personality, your intelligence, then from this latent variable, you have the outcome. The link from the latent variable and the outcome changes institutionally. There is a Robbins reform, and so this link changes. So I think now we should bring economics back into the genetic analysis of the data, because we know now that this link changes. Everybody thinks it's obvious. I think, okay, then we have to do something about it. So it's a very good question. I think it points to a direction in which we have to go now of bringing back the economics into the genetic analysis. So you study in binary measure is fast. Okay, and then you have things like this. Let me explain. These are 4 different alleles. So 4 different, the frequency. This is 1, this is 0. Okay, this curve, there is a frequency. Sorry, this is income, standard between 0 and 1. We put it between 0 and 1, okay? And here is the frequency of an allele. It may sound mysterious, but I'm asking the following question. So this is the question. I tell you the income of someone. And then I say, okay, there are, say, 2 SNPs, one this and one this, okay? And I tell you that one SNP, I hope you know now by now what a SNP is. One SNP is very good for educational attainment. The other one doesn't really matter. It's okay? So I tell you the income of a bunch of people. And for each of these person, I tell you the frequency of the good SNP, the one that is favorable to educational attainment, and the frequency of the irrelevant SNP. Think through. What does the model tell us about the frequency of the 2 SNPs as a function of the income? You don't understand what I ask. I'll ask you in a more irritating way. If this is really, okay, this is really, I use these terms so that it's clear what I'm saying. I tell you, a rich person and a poor person. You know, this is not going to go well, but I'll try anyway, because this is what this graph is saying. Who do you think is more likely to have a higher frequency of the good SNP? Is it clear now? Everybody understand what I'm asking? Okay, I don't tell you which one. Okay, this is what the simulations say. Now there are data that confirm this idea. If you don't understand what I'm saying, I'll try to elaborate. I described for you a very complicated, but I think realistic process in which parents meet depending on their intelligence and their income, and usually the mating is assortative. And so this complicated process tends to twist the invariant measure in a direction away from random association. And it will make the correlation between income and different SNPs adjust. And the adjustment is going to be very strong for SNPs for which have an effect on educational attainment. The adjustment is going to be absent when the SNP has no effect. I don't know if you're following, but this is a very irritating conclusion. Doesn't suggest eugenics, believe me, but that's what it does.
But is it not something that makes sense? And now that you have the two very long.
You're asking or you're stating that it makes sense? Yeah, in fact, you know, eventually people go in different stages. First stage is that can't be. Second, oh, that may be, but it's really dangerous. And the third one is, oh yeah, it's dangerous, but actually it's obvious. We are slowly progressing to the third stage, in my opinion. Again, guys, I grew up reading a book of a Catholic priest. His name was Lorenzo Milani. You never heard of him, but was a guy that made, 1968, wrote a book. And one sentence of that book really struck me. And that sentence was saying, you think that God makes, oh no, he says, stupid people. be born in the house of the poor. I think you are making God to be mischievous. God is not so evil to make stupid people be born in the house of the poor. I really spent 10 years of my life trying to act on this sentence because I really believed it. Maybe it's not true. Am I coming through? Good. So we do the, okay, then I have a bunch of regressions. Look, of course, PG, I wouldn't be here if the polygenic score didn't matter. I mean, it explains. If you want to, so this is income. If you take income at age 29 in our data. Polygenic score, of course, matters. And then when it doesn't matter if you start putting the relevant variables that are very, the relevant variables, for instance, positive externalizing, once you decompose, so this regression have 3 steps. One is what we can explain without using the polygenic score. Then we have the polygenic score, we see it matters, and then we try to decompose through different variables and we see what these variables are. Okay, so we do regressions like this. They all, oh, it also matters the polygenic score of the mother and the father. Okay, so we are now in the process of, what we are doing is this. We take a standard economic model. We build on the shoulders of giants. But we now have an understanding of how genetic transmission operates. We put these things together and we have a deeper understanding of how society works. Third revolution, personality theory. I should stop at 11, right? Am I boring you? Personality theory. So from this is really where the change should start, which is what is human nature. So all men are created equal. That's true, in the sense that all men have the same rights. But men are not equal. They are very different. They're very different in skills. They are very different in preferences. They are very different in general attitudes. So we need to understand this. Psychology has done some progress in this, building something which is called personality theory, which is the types. These are the types. So a little bit we had in economic analysis. So personality theory deals with the broader characteristics that, as I said already, we had something in economics, which was the 2 variables that we always use. Maybe we don't differentiate among individuals, but we have variables that describe the attitude of a person, which is attitude to risk and discount factor. Okay, these are 2 parameters that describe an individual. There are many other characteristics. For instance, intelligence is one of these characteristics. Another one is conscientiousness, how systematic you are in the pursuit of your targets. You are conscientious if the night before the exam you don't go to a party. If you go to a party, not very conscientious. Things like this. Obviously are important. Is it intelligence? No. Is it discount factor? Maybe, but it's really something else. It's the ability to control your impulses. So we need to understand this, and then we can link it together with the neuroeconomics and genetics to understand very important things. For instance, reasons for the existence of inequality and social mobility, like in the paper I just described. And this one is important, possible endogenous nature of institutions. Let me explain. I have another paper, 2 papers actually, a bunch of papers that study experimentally the behavior of subjects in repeated games. Maybe you know it. If you don't know it, I will ask you a question. So you bring in subjects and you make them play repeatedly, let's say the prisoner dilemma, with parameters of the experiment so that the repeated game has multiple equilibria. For instance, defect is an equilibrium always, but cooperate is an equilibrium. Okay? The first day of the experiment, you bring the subjects in and you measure their, you create a bundle. You measure what's your favorite color, what is the name of your sister, what is your intelligence, what is your favorite team. So we ask a bunch of questions. One of them is how intelligent you are, but it's carefully hidden so that they don't notice. Okay, so the second day, we know how intelligent each person is. Is it clear? Then we run a repeated prisoner dilemma experimentally, but we put the intelligence together and the less intelligent together. What do you think happens? There are multiple equilibria. I want to know the brutal, what happens at the end. So the equilibria that they choose will be different in the two groups. Which way? So we have an interesting alternative, one that nothing happens. It wouldn't be published in JP if nothing happened. Intelligent people cooperate more, intelligent people cooperate less. Remember, oh no, I'll tell you one thing. If you put the parameters so that the only equilibrium is defect, the intelligent people defect like crazy. So it's not that intelligent people are more generous, altruistic. Intelligent people do what intelligent people do, defect, when the only thing is defect. The interesting question is what happens in range of parameters in which you can either always defect or always cooperate. And now we really have an alternative, which I think is interesting, and is do intelligent people cooperate more than less intelligent people? That's the question I have for you. Think of the answer, because the answer is going to tell something about what you are. Is what you think how you think human nature works. Because, you know, some economists, okay, here. Okay, the next question. I'll ask you two questions. The next question is, we have data on whether a person votes. This is data from the US, UK, Sweden. So, of course, Western societies, okay? And you also have data on whether they vote in important elections and not important elections. And we have the polygenic score for educational attainment. Okay, these are the data we have. And now I want to know, I tell you the polygenic score of a person. Is the person, two people, one has a higher polygenic score than the other? Which of the two is more likely to vote? So now you have two questions. Which person is more likely to cooperate? Which person is more likely to vote? Go ahead, think about it. Yeah, but you know, I ask economists, are you an economist? No. You know? So I ask economists, and economists, you see the machine. The economists start thinking, oh, voter paradox. Oh, intelligent person understands voter paradox. Intelligent person understands that voting is irrelevant. Intelligent person understands that voting is costly but irrelevant. Intelligent person will not vote. The logic of this is impeccable. So prediction of all the economists I asked, the intelligent person will not vote. Yes. Some people get the right answer for the wrong reason. So, man, the answer is intelligent people cooperate more. Even when cooperating is good, when cooperating is bad, they defect like crazy. I mean, show you the data, they are the first ones to defect. But when there is something to be gained, intelligent people understand. And intelligent people, higher polygenic score, vote more. And they vote more in the less relevant elections. Less relevant are, for instance, the midterm election in the United States. And the reason is obvious, right? Voting is real information processing. Information processing is costly, but it's less costly if you're smarter. So that's the right reason. I don't know what behavioral economists say for the reason. That is in my opinion. But look, it's really mysterious for the moment. We are working. So that's a graph. I don't have time. I mean, the effect is large. I mean, it's half the effect of education is independent of education is larger than the one of income on the R squared. So it matters. So that's what, okay, I have only 10 minutes. So I had at this point. So up to this point, there was university. There is, maybe. I think I've already said things that are not so obvious. But in the next part, I wanted to derive some general implication, and I warn you, this is what I think. But really, all I said so far, this is what I think. I'm not involved in any of my conflicts. So I would pause here for a moment. Any questions? So I described to you 3 directions in which economics is changing and should change more than it has, and what we have done.
Before how intelligent they are, or you had some independent source of the.
No, we are really evil. We did all sorts. So no. So the first experiment was on purpose. We tried to hide the issue of intelligence. So we, as I was saying, we bring them in. We ask all sorts of questions. 99% is just a cloud of dust to confuse their idea. Not to confuse, to make intelligence not signal. And then we see what the effect is. And the intuition is really that less smart people understand that there is a possible cooperating equilibrium, but they tend to do small mistakes. And then in a repeated game, small mistakes are deadly. So they unravel and you end up in defect. So we understand a little bit of the effect. Then we have done other experiments, another one which is coming out now, in which we do something the opposite. Not only we tell a person, look, on the intelligence score, you're here and your opponent is here. Now go ahead and make your move. And we see whether, and there is complicated. Because, you know, there is a little bit in human nature. The other guy is smarter than me. Maybe he can help me. Maybe he can try to trick me. So you see human nature working the way it's supposed to do. Halfway trust, halfway suspicion. So we do all treatments. Yeah. Sorry.
There are less intelligent students. And
We have who? Who we?
for example, this is a just hypothetical scenario. So there are more intelligent people, there are less intelligent people. So we put them together in the class. So do intelligent people cooperate with intelligent only, or do they cooperate with the less intelligent? So
Yeah, very good question. So we did that. So intelligent people try to teach the less intelligent people. That's what broadly happens. So when you put them together, the cooperation rate goes up from, so you have high intelligence, low intelligence cooperation rate. If you put them together, it goes here, not the whole way. And it really depends on how many intelligent and how many non-intelligent you have. You know, guys, I mean, this is the society I see when I look around me. You know. Okay, I'll just make two brief comments just to irritate behavioral economists. Is that okay? So I'll just make this comment and then we agree to disagree. So this is a view of the extension of economic analysis that is widespread. So yeah, new economics and gene economics are important, but they are the basis for a different. So there is neoclassical economics, which is this absurd idea that I don't know how people manage to have this crazy idea that people are rational and selfish. And they are pretty good at being rational and very, very selfish. So they're bad. And thanks to neuroeconomics and gene economics, we'll have a new foundation. And I think behavioral economics is the most coherent plan to implement this project. My view is slightly different. No, it's not slightly, it's very, very different. That is, the important point is this. Classical economics has a unique understanding of human society. That I really believe. So I'll explain later. Classical economics has two fundamental insights, which should not be abandoned. And one is what is called the individualistic idea, that the social outcomes are best explained as a combination of individuals that try to achieve what is best for each one of them. Each individual is pretty good at deciding what is good for him, and is pretty selfish. The way in which this individual behavior is combined is through some equilibrium concept. We have two, one is general equilibrium, the other one is Nash equilibrium. And these are the two cornerstones of economics as I know it. And this is the cornerstones of economics that are these are the two cornerstones of which the critic is most ferocious. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, the assumption that people are selfish and rational is under attack. And people claim that neuroeconomics is a proof of this. I disagree. So classical economics has unique understanding, a tradition that political philosophy that goes back to the modern age. Machiavelli, Hobbes, not only Machiavelli and Hobbes. I have. Okay, so that's my bottom line. I think I will stop here. So this the economic and social behavior is a result of a combination of individual behavior, as I said, well explained by personal and rational interest, as of course incentive matters. Ignoring this fact will not make it go away. I'm just repeating what I just said. That we have two concepts. So the second component is equilibrium. The first one is individualism. To the third one, we have to add what I call biological materialism, which is what I explained so far. Biological materialism. Understanding the genetic basis and the neural basis of individual behavior. This opposite to this materialistic view, I'm almost done. I want to, and then opposite to this view is that human nature does not exist. Human nature is simply the outcome of social processes. has three corollaries. Men are all potentially equal, and all differences among men are constructed by society. Every difference between groups is due to discrimination. Human nature is infinitely malleable and subject to the transforming action of reason. That's, I think, is the political consequence of this assumption. Human nature does not exist. Maybe I'm mysterious. To be less mysterious, I take it with a philosopher which I used to like, I confess, and I think it's just Karl Marx. You know who Karl Marx is, right? Okay, so he claims to be a materialist, but I'm sorry if this polemic will not interest some of you. I'm really sorry, but it's something I feel I have to give. It's something I have to get off my back, so to speak. I was reading. If you go to my library, there are all the books of Marx, all underlined. My son makes fun of me. Picks a book at random, opens the Marx. Look, you were reading this stuff. Yeah, of course I was reading. I really believed it. So I'm just picking two quotes to explain this idea. Human nature does not exist. What does it mean? It means this. So I'll take, to be really polemic with the old man, I take 1846, just at the beginning of Marx, and 1875 at the end. Marx dies in 1883. This is one of the most famous passages of Marx. He explains the following idea. All the evil in society is coming from the division of labor, which is induced by capitalistic mode of production. Division of labor has created a society in which each one of us has a sphere of activity, and only that. So man in capitalistic society is a hunter, a fisherman, a herdsman, or a critical critic, because this is where the division of labor puts him. It's not because originally he is by nature a hunter, or a herdsman, or a critical critic. No, it's because society puts him there through the process of division of labor. And then he said, no, I envision a future society, which is the one written in red, in which in the future, it will be possible for a man to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner. Do you like this vision of society? Do you like it? I like it. I love it. I used to love it. I said, that's how society should be. It's too bad it can't. You know, how do I know it can't? Well, you know, Karl Marx himself never went hunting, never went to fish, never rear cattle. He always criticized. That's what he was doing. If you put Karl Marx after the revolution, he will criticize in the morning, criticize in the afternoon, criticize in the evening, and criticize after dinner. Why? Because Karl Marx is Karl Marx. That's my objection. If I could talk to the old man, I would say, look, there is personality. Okay, so you can say this is when he was very young, 46, born in 1888 and 1918, so he was very young. But here, I mean, it was 8 years before 9, he repeats it. Critic of the Gotha program is the critic of the program of the socialists. He will say, again, he says the same thing. When all the springs of cooperative wealth will flow more abundantly, finally society will inscribe on his banners, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. So it's the idea that once you change the structure of society, you change man. And he was consistent on this. And that's really this. Human nature doesn't exist. If you create the right society, you will have someone who hunts in the morning, fishes in the afternoon, and criticizes in the evening. I don't think it's true. That's my philosophical view of society, and I'll stop here.
Before Shaumendu is going to chair the session, but before that, one announcement for the people who are in the audience who is asking questions. We sitting at the back can't hear you. So before you ask the question, there's a mic and a student volunteer is going to hand you in. You wait to get the mic and then ask the question so that we get to hear your interesting questions. Okay, this is a request to the audience.
So welcome everyone once again. So I'm going to chair this session as well. And Sudhir has very aptly introduced the speaker in the morning, so I don't want to reintroduce him any further. So without much further ado, we are looking forward to your lectures and questions. I guess you want to take as you go along. Right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think it works well. So the title is Selection and the Roy Model. The Roy Model is the Roy Model you study in microeconomics. I hope you study. Roy Model. Okay. And how it interacts with selection of the genotype. So it's an application of the study of how we use genetics. And it's all clarifying everything on Marx. And that's my answer to Marx or Marxists. So the question we address here is, this is the hypothesis we test. In the recent past, so recent is 14,000 years before present. PPE is before present. There has been a selective force operating in the direction of an increase of the frequency of educational attainment enhancing alleles. So selection has operated in the last 14,000 years in the way in which we'll see by changing the distribution of the genotype among humans. That is following the transition from foraging hunter-gatherer society to farmers during the Neolithic agricultural transition and AT. The general hypothesis we consider is that technical change induced genetic change through the change in allele. That's my view of history, non-Marxist view of history. I think this is addressing what you were asking. So there is technical change. This induces a genetic change, and then as a consequence, a change in economic activity and institution. And special instance of a general relation that we hypothesize between technology, genetics, and institutions. And so the idea is that technology affects the distribution of genotype, and then this affects the institution. So if you want, I threw in a quotation of Marx, a wrote the rest, which puzzled me. So I will insist in the comparison with Marx. Marx, as everybody knows, thought the technical progress would change the nature of the mode of production and the relationship of production, and then that would change institutions. He forgot genetics because he didn't know. That's not too bad. The problem, as I was trying to explain, is that he was assuming that he knew the answer, but he didn't. Okay. So let's start with some background information. The Neolithic agricultural transition started around this, about 11,000 years ago. And was a transition from a lifestyle of hunting and gathering to one of agriculture and settlement. So humans changed from foragers to farmer. There was an earlier transformation from foraging to farmers among Natufians, also induced by a climate change. You will see it in a moment. And this is crucial. This transformation involved a widespread process of genetic transformation of plants and animals. Everybody agrees on this. The process is called domestication. The wolf changed into a dog. Everybody in his right mind will agree that the transformation from wolf to dog was not cultural. We agree? It's a different animal. So my question is, why should it be different for human? The seeds changed, the species changed, humans changed. You agree that is a reasonable hypothesis to consider? Good. That's what we are discussing. It is reasonable to conjecture that a similar process occurred to human population. Originating in the Fertile Crescent and spread to Europe at the speed of 1 kilometer per year. You will see in a moment. So that's a Neolithic agricultural transition, changed animals, we conjecture changed humans. It's important to know that Neolithic transformation was associated to a Neolithic demographic transition. Demographic transition has occurred, of course, in the same period. So it's detectable by study of the proportion of immature skeletons in cemeteries. So you look at the fraction of skeletons of the age between 5 and 15, and has a sudden increase around that period as society changed from nomadic to sedentary. This increase can be explained well by a model in which there is a sudden increase in fertility of women, of course, which was in turn induced by a change in the energy balance of the mothers. So the mothers were consuming less because they were sedentary rather than moving around with the child, and because their diet changed from that of foragers to that of farming, with higher proportion, higher energy in general, higher fraction of carbohydrates. So both intake and outtake produced an increase in fertility of women, increase in population, which was then compensated by an increase in mortality, which was induced by sedentarism because of crowded living conditions. So it's okay. So this is a Malthus model in action. And so it's a time sequence which is opposite to the contemporary demographic transition. The contemporary demographic transition is what's happened in the last 200 years. So it was first a decline in mortality, increase in population, then decrease in fertility, population becomes stable, and now is declining, or will decline by about the middle of this century. Okay? So the Neolithic demographic transition was an increase in fertility followed by an increase in mortality. This is important because it creates the condition for the phenomenon that I'm going to describe to happen. Okay. So this is a regression because economists have considered the problem of the transition. And they start from a puzzle. You don't have Marx here, but you have Marxist thinkers, some Bolts. He's a close friend of mine. I mean, I like him, but nothing wrong with being Marxist, but you're a Marxist. And they have the following puzzle. Actually, if you look at skeletons of foragers and farmers, you find that the health condition of foragers was not as bad as you might expect. In fact, in some respect, it was even better. And if you try to estimate the productivity of agricultural products among foragers was not much lower than among farmers. The nature of this data is debated. but economists focused on this. And I want to take this as an example of how economists address an issue when they ignore the biological side. Okay? So they say the key transformation here was the emergence of private property. So it's clear what happens, right? If you change from foraging to farming, you plant seeds that are yours, you tend to a herd of cattle that is yours, and now you have to guarantee that the output of the seeds you plant and the animals you raise is yours. That's a crucial transformation. And so what you produce has to be protected from theft. And they use this to explain something that may be considered a puzzle. What is a puzzle? Well, if these claims are really true, then society seemed to have done a stupid choice, because it went from a technology that was foraging to a technology that was farming that was not superior. So the puzzle that Sambol's proposes is, why did they do this? Why did they switch to an inferior technology? Is it clear? And one explanation that is due to Rothon and Seabright, it's summarized here. I'll try to explain it to you. Think of a very simple 2x2 game in which you can choose, two groups can choose either foraging or farming.
I have one clarificatory question. So how would you treat the emergence of language?
Of languages?
Yeah.
So that's independent of this language. You would have also among foragers for communicating. So it's really, language is very important, but it's independent of what.
But that's a cultural phenomenon. And many believe that biologically we have not changed. Biologically, we have not changed. There's a language, emergence of language that brought about all changes that are so around us.
Yeah, so it's not clear. Why do we say we have not changed biologically?
I'm not a biologist, but I've read the paper and they're talking about the biologically we have not changed. It's a language, the emergence of language that is the key development.
So what I'm going to say is relevant for this. What is change? So let me go back to I introduced it. We have to define what change is. So you remember my earlier introduction in which I say that an individual is characterized by a long string of 0, 1/2, and 1. A population has a distribution over these long strings. So the space of probability distribution is this long string of 0, 1/2, and 1 to the power k is the number of SNPs. K is large, 6 million. And over this space, you have a probability distribution. Suppose this probability distribution changes. Is that a change? Is a question. Is that a change? Yes, yes. For instance, emergence of language may be associated with a change in the distribution of this genotype in favor of alleles that are positive for educational attainment. So when we say biologically we don't change, we have to be careful. If we define as a population as a probability distribution of string of SNPs, that may change, even if of course we are the same species. We are really the same group of people, but the distribution. So I'm using selection as operating in this dimension. Is it clear? Is it clear to everybody? That's what I want to study.
So the question is, I mean, given bullet point 1, the 2 claims there.
Yeah.
If I'm living in a forest versus I'm doing agriculture, where will I live longer? And is that relevant in this discussion?
Yes, so now we need to think of a model, right? Who is choosing what? So, by the way, it's the historical reality is that you forest climate and you will see it change a lot, which is something that they ignore. But if I think for the moment that human race is making a choice, now, first of all, I have to start thinking there is a group that lives in a location and another group lives in another location. And if you want to think of this in game theoretic terms, I think that a group can choose for farming. Okay, and I have now, and there is of associated to a choice of foraging and farming. And let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the choice of both choosing foraging, so the earlier technology, is better. So I'm building for you a prisoner dilemma game in which foraging is really cooperate and farming is defect. So the product from foraging, both foraging, is better for both than both farming. So how come we end up in an equilibrium in which we both farm? And the logic is the logic of the prisoner dilemma. I have to check what happens if you are stuck with foraging and I switch to farming. Okay, the prisoner dilemma logic would tell me that my payoff now is going to go up. And why is that? Well, because if the other is stuck to foraging and you go from foraging to farming, now you have all the military structure that is necessary for the defense of the private property when you do farming. Okay, so you switch from foraging to farming, you have to build some militaries that guard your seeds and your cattle. Once you do that, though, you have a military structure that can be used for defensive purposes, but also for offensive purposes. So I can go and steal stuff from the other. And if the other is still to foraging, I am better off. That's the logic. So the game is, so you see what the logic is, right? We may end up as a human species to an inferior technology because we have really a prisoner dilemma in which if the other is foraging, you're better off by going to farming. Think how stupid we are, we go to an inferior technology. That's the vision. Okay. That's what okay. So, you know this story? I mean, it's known as, read this story, please. It's a famous little story that illuminates, so firstly, the story. So there's a guy who lost a ring. And he searched it for a while, could not find it. He went out in the yard and began to look there. The wife said, Muller, you lost your ring in the living room. Why are you looking for it in the yard? And Muller says, the room is too dark and I can't see very well. I came out in the courtyard to look for my ring because there is much more light there. I mean, my colleague Anmol Bandari called it the lamppost bias. You only look for the key under the lamppost. But this is a joke, but it's a very old tradition. I think economists do a little bit of this mistake. The one thing they know how to study is institutional change. They ignore the fact that the key maybe is the genetic transformation, but genetic transformation is a room which is very dark, it's hard to find. And so they just don't do it. So that's, I think it's a methodological shortcoming of economics that we might want to address. And the second one is an ideological point. You read, okay, let me say, what do you think of this passage? This is Roton and Seabright. Let me read this, which I think it's indicative of how sometimes economists fall into a trap. The evidence about early Neolithic standards, that is the evidence that foraging was better than farming, adds substance to the eternal appeal that the myths of the noble savage has had throughout human history, since such myths have seemed to suggest counterintuitively that economic development since the time of the alleged fall has been both inevitable and regrettable. Do you know the myth of the noble savage? No? The noble savage has, do you know Rousseau, the second discourse on inequality? Have you ever heard this sentence? Oh, evil the guy who first built fences and declared, this is mine. And if someone had opposed this creation of the fences and ripped the fences out, he would have spared humankind of misery. You know this? Rousseau, Discourse on Inequality, opening of the second part of the Discourse on Inequality. It's a milestone in our culture. I think it's a profoundly wrong point of view. I put this because this is a frontispiece of the second discourse. This is the noble savage who tells his masters, I am dropping the clothes of civilization and going among my peers, let's go. I'm abandoning your society. Society has created inequality through private property, and I'm going back to my society. That's the idea of the noble savage. You don't notice that? It's important. It creates our thoughts. Okay, so that's what I think of this. I think it's profoundly wrong on methodological grounds because it ignores that the key is in the other room. And on philosophical grounds because it is. Okay, alternative interpretation of what happened. Are you with me? I think, this is important. So here is the view. That is well documented. There was a climate change, occurred about 12,000 years ago. The change in climate induced a change in the allocation of individual of different skills to different occupations. That's the Roy model part. You will see it more in detail. Because it changed the relative productivity of foraging and farming. Climate change, if the temperature rises, the productivity of farming increases with respect to foraging. The different productivity induces a different reproductive fitness of those who choose foraging and farming. So the the number of farmers increases. We have seen from the Neolithic demographic transition that there was a demographic change. And this induced a change in the distribution of the genotype. That's what I call a change. And we agree that it's reasonable to call a change. And so then this created larger concentrated communities, cities, and new institutions. So that's the instance of a process I had described earlier, change in technology, change in genetics, change in institutions. It's an hypothesis. I want to test it in genetic data. Is that clear?
Are you considering the climate change is exogenous?
Yeah. Oh, because it was. I mean, there is no doubt that there was and was not induced by CO2. It was a hell of a change. And this is, these are just, we are looking, DNA is ancient DNA. So it's the DNA that you get from skeletons that you find in burial grounds by accident. It illustrates the fact that it moved from here, the Fertile Crescent, up to northwest. Let's go to the climate change. So that this is a flower called Dryas. There's 8 leaves. So this was the appearance of this flower shows that the temperature has fallen. So that's this name, Younger Dryas, is the last reduction in the temperature that occurred between 12,000 and 11,600 years ago. So that's the climate change I'm talking about. So to look at the climate change, so this is the Younger Dryas, this is the last period of low temperature. So this is the temperature on the sea surface of the Mediterranean. So I'm telling you this because when you look at temperature change, people always quote the ice core of Greenland. But of course, Greenland is far from the Fertile Crescent. So the fact that temperature changed that there doesn't really mean that it changed in the Fertile Crescent. So this data show that it did change. And I want to emphasize that the change was huge. When I say huge this is sea surface temperature in Celsius. It went from here, she was, I don't know, around 10, to here, which was 23. It's a huge change. It's 12 degrees, not 0.5 like we are afraid of happening now. Are you with me? It's a huge climate change. So of course it changed the relative productivity of agriculture and forestry. Other evidence, this is the temperature in the Sorek caves in Israel. You can infer the temperature happening thousands of years ago by taking a sample and looking at the concentration of the oxygen isotopes. And you see the same phenomenon. It was low here, and then it jumped at the same, we are the same scale, it's 12 centigrades. It was a huge change in temperature. So that's the exogenous phenomenon. Okay. So now we can look at our estimation problem and hypothesis testing. Our estimation problem is the following. We have the frequency of alleles in hunter-gatherer population. We take that as an initial condition. So for each of the SNPs that are relevant for educational attainment, we have a frequency in a population of hunter-gatherers. We take the current frequency as the final condition. The frequency. Now we provide a selection model. So now to make a decent econometric testing, we need to provide a model that is simulating the data. And there is a parameter that measures the direction and the strength of selection. And then we measure the distance between the predicted final frequency according to the model and the frequency current, which is the final condition. And we test the hypothesis that the strength of the selection parameter is positive and significantly so. Is the estimation data clear? Is the estimation problem clear? We have an initial condition of frequency, a final condition, a model gives a prediction on the sign of change and gives you a way to measure your standard errors, and then you can test the hypothesis. Is it clear? Am I losing you guys? Am I boring you? I mean, it's important. Humankind changed in the last 12,000 years because of a chain of causal effect. Has nothing to do with what Marx said, to keep repeating, okay? What is the data? So the data are from ancient DNA. So we have ancient DNA, so on the period of even 30,000 years ago, you can trace what the frequency of alleles was over time. And the hypothesis is that this frequency changed. Oh, and the data, so these are the data. It's the frequency of alleles, in particular alleles that are favorable to educational attainment over the last, say, 50,000 years. And we focus in particular to the question, did something happen 14,000 years, let's say 11,000 years ago, at the same time in which climate changed?
So these are the data. The hypothesis is climate change, relative productivity of the two technology changed, allocation changed, selection operate. We use random mating here. The structure is the structure of the paper I explained earlier. Random mating means, now he asked what is random mating. Random mating, I say that a man marries, mates with a woman randomly, independent of the characteristic of the two individuals. It's a simplifying assumption. Do you mind if I introduce some very minimal notation? Good. Okay, so K is the number of loci that are relevant, the alleles, the positions in the SNP. M is the number of individuals. So 2M is the number of total alleles. Anyway, you have to remember K is how many loci. M or N is the number of people that are there. Selection in a population depends on how big the population is. You can think of a stochastic process is very different depending on the number of people in there. I don't want to lose people. This is this haplotype. If I keep, I wish I had the other. Do you remember the picture in which I had the two strands? If you keep the information of how a SNP is associated to the other along the strand, that's an haplotype. If I ignore that, it's a genotype. It's a small technical thing. If you don't understand, it doesn't matter. But the crucial thing is there is a probability distribution on the types. This is the set over which I take this probability distribution, which is induced by a population of size n. Okay, I'm trying to define the basic of my stochastic process. Are you still with me? Yes. How do I define the haplotype? Yeah. I hope I'm not boring you, but you need to know this stuff. So do you remember A, T, C, and G? Good. One important point is that although in a position you can have either A or T or C or G, you actually typically for most of the SNPs that are important, you have only two of them. Okay? So you have either only one or two possibilities. So you could have in principle four, but I'm just saying SNPs are mostly biallelic. So in a position, you may have everybody has A, or some people have A and some people have, actually, some people have A and T, say, or A and C.
But that those are the nucleotides, right? I mean, one is hydrogen.
No, then I say I pick among these the one that is favorable to, say, educational attainment, and I call that 1, and I call the other one 0. I lose somebody, okay. So let's say that in a position you can have either A or C. And let's say that C is good and this is not good. Okay, so I call this 1 and I call this 0. Okay, and I repeat, it could be that some people have T, but this doesn't happen. Okay, so this is what I mean when I say that it's biallelic. Okay, so now I have one strand and then I have another strand. Okay, you remember this when I had this picture? So this is one strand. So I look here and I have here A and here C. Okay, so your genotype here is 0 and a 1. Okay, so then if you use this convention that you call 1 the favorable one and 0 the non-favorable one, along a strand, you can have 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1. Okay? That's an haplotype. And on the other one, you have 0, 0, 0, 1, 0. So the complete description of who you are is two sequences of zeros and ones. Yeah. Yes. So that's what the haplotype is. If I ignore the distinction, the fact that how they are laid out in the strand, I take the sum. So I have here 0, here 0, here 1, here 1 plus 1 is 2, 0, and so on. And then I have a sequence of 0, 1, and 2. Okay, that's the genotype. It's less informative. I'm defining the basic structure of which my stochastic process operates. Uh-huh. Yes, that's the frequency. That's the frequency in the population. So you take the sum of at this position, and you get, say, 0.75. That means that 75% of people have A and 25% have C. That's really the crucial variable that I'm studying. Is that it? It's denoted by pi. Now I have to tell you how it changes. Sorry, it has to be technical at some point, right? It's okay. I call Z the phenotype. To be brutal, how intelligent you are. To give an example. Okay, that is in part given by this sum. So I look at your genotype. In position K is either going to be 0, 1/2, or 1. So I have a number here. I multiply it by a coefficient. That was the beta that I had in my theory paper, but is estimated by. And I get your phenotype as determined by its genetic component. The phenotype, eventually, how intelligent you are, is going to be determined in part by these and in part by environment. But this is, I'll call it the genetic component of the phenotype. Are you still with me? Okay. And then I can define a fitness function, which is the Z, the phenotype. Let's say how intelligent you are, to be brutal. And I multiply by a number, can be positive or negative, that tells you how fit you are once I know the genetic component of your phenotype. And I will use mostly this directional selection. So the probability according to which you are chosen in the next period depends how fit you are. Okay? More or less. There is a fitness function. The crucial point is this. There is a parameter that is telling me how society selects a phenotype. If this omega is positive, Z makes you more fit, more likely to be selected in the next period. If this omega is negative, makes you less fit. The crucial question is whether this omega is positive or negative, and whether it changed about 12,000 years ago. Is that okay? If you understand only a little, that's what I want to check. So to give an idea, this is how the beta are distributed. There are about 400 SNPs that are important. And the size of the coefficient is distributed like this. It's sharper than exponential. So it declines. There are some SNPs are very important, like this, and some SNPs that are not important. Just to give you an idea how this thing works. So here is the first test. 0 is present. This is 30,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. This is the polygenic, here is called risk score. This is the polygenic score for educational attainment in the population that we find. Between 30 and 10,000 is approximately stable, then starts going up. So this picture suggests that there is something to our hypothesis that around here, when the climate change occurred, there was a change in the distribution of the genotype. Are you with me? Okay, so any statistician would say this picture, so what? Could be all randomness. There could be nothing there. So that's a serious objection. And that's what I'm trying to address. But looking at this picture, you say, okay, yeah, looks like there is something. I have to prove to you that this something is significant. And I can only do that with the model. Is that okay? So I'm going to produce a model for you, and I'm going to kill everybody of you because it's going to be complicated, but really the bottom line is this change here is significant. If you want a short story, is this. There was a big change in the distribution of the phenotype when the climate changed. You know, you can have a rough. So the end of the Younger Dryas is here. So the temperature started going up and was fairly quick. So around this. You can even do an analysis using contemporary DNA. That's a fascinating topic. You can look at contemporary DNA. You can use something which is called you can reconstruct using the theory of coalescent, Kingman, 1960s. I mean, it's a very interesting theory of stochastic processes. You can reconstruct by the current profile of the genotype, what was the sequence of mutations when it happened. So you can, from the present, you can reconstruct what the stochastic process was going backward, and you can check what the polygenic score was in the past, and you get the same picture. It was stable until about 500 generations ago and starts going up. Okay, let me explain. The number 560. Why it's a very simple equation. If you divide 14,000 by 25 years, you get 560 generations. So there are 560 approximately, okay, generations between us and people who were living 14,000 years ago. So we have now a time clock. Everything that we can explain has to be realistically happen within 560 generations. We can't cheat on this. We have 560 generations, okay, with biological data, and our hypothesis has to pass this test. Not only that there was a selection, but could have occurred in approximately 12,000 years, 560 generations, okay? Is it clear what 560 is? Okay, that's what our constraint. Okay, then we write the model. Okay, guys, I don't have time. We write the model, okay? It's a bunch of multinomial, blah, blah. It's bright Fisher. You want me to spend time on this? Maybe if, how much time I have until 1? Okay, I'll give you the general idea. So let me go back to this. And each position, this is K. We have 1, to K. See, in each position, you can count how many A you have and how many C you have in the population. You get a number between 0 and 1. That's the frequency of the allele that is favorable to educational attainment. Okay, so that's a number between 0 and 1. The entire description of the mean of the population is a P here. Okay, that's the frequency of the population, of the good allele, so to speak. That's what I have at the beginning of a generation. There is going to be a sequence of events. At the end of the sequence of events, I will get a new generation. So I call this P of T, and I derive a T plus 1, the new frequency. It's a stochastic process, okay? So I will have the mean, I will have the variance. So the essential thing is you start with, so this is what happens within a generation. So I have a frequency, there is a bunch of stuff, I will go through it, and then you have a new frequency. Remember, this is a vector of dimension K for each allele. Is it clear? The sequence of step is there is initial condition, there is mutation, there is Hardy-Weinberg is the equilibrium that you get when there is random mating. We assume that the transmission of this among loci is independent. Then there is the selection. Here is the crucial part, okay? You have a fitness. This fitness is changed by the selection. It makes people with higher educational attainment more likely to reproduce. You get a multi-distribution on the next period. You reduce into the frequency, and you have the new frequency. So the bottom line is, I'll come in a moment. There is a bunch of stuff that are all biological, except this one, because this involves the fitness function. It makes someone with an allele that is favorable to educational attainment more or less likely to be reproduced in the next period. Yes.
I'm lost in the details, but if you can just tell me, is this a Markov process?
Is it?
Is it a Markov process? Is it a Markov chain?
Non-linear, yes.
Non-linear. Markov chain, though.
Yep. It has an invariant distribution, you can study. So, okay, so good. That's so I've described for you a Markov process, non-linear, depending on the parameter which is hidden here, which is the selection parameter. Okay, and the nature of this stochastic process, how it evolves, will change depending on this parameter. The rest is really biology. I don't know. The mutation rate is how likely it is an allele to change for an individual. That depends, it's a biological constant. So that's one parameter. The other parameter, which is a little bit in the background, is the population size. Because you can think that when the population is very large, basically the law of large numbers applies in every period. If you are away from there, then the process is farther from a deterministic process. Am I giving you some useful information? Okay. Excuse me? No. So that's the omega d is really. Let me give you. Oh, it is economical. Let me give you two little pieces. You'll remind me that. Okay, now you can do two things now. You can approximate in continuous time, you can approximate in the phenotype space. The process is complicated, or you can use simulations and simulation-based inference to test the process. We use both, So here is how so this microprocess has an invariant distribution on the polygenic score, so on the genetic component of the phenotype. Okay, and you can study its properties. You can be comforted by the fact that whether you use the genotype or the haplotype, the difference is not very large. Okay, and now we come to the crucial thing, which is the selection. Excuse me? Oh, why this is a normal distribution? Well,
So you show in the previous slide that mutation follows a binomial distribution. Was that right?
are you referring to this?
Yeah, second one. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Why is it?
Oh, because suppose that it stays biallelic, so I have an A and a T. For each individual, you can change to T with probability mu. Mu is ridiculously small, or stay with probability 1 minus mu. That's it. And if you think about it for 2 seconds, you will see that it becomes a binomial over the population. It has the population size in it. It has the population size in it, of course. Yes. Yeah.
So the capital F in bullet point 5 is related to the small f, right? The selection, the fitness parameter.
Yeah, is the look. So you'll see that I'm making sense.
Yes.
That's one way. Or there is this other way.
These are 2 exogenous specifications, and this could have been taken to be endogenous, right? I mean, like
it won't make a
like
difference. It won't make a difference.
it was. I mean, neither of the 2 they produce same.
Look, I'll show you. I'll show you proof by picture. Yes. So no, formally, for practical purposes, yes. So it depends on the time horizon. So if omega is very small, you really can have 2. They look like 2 invariant distribution. You will see. Maybe. Okay, let me explain. I'll get back to this. So here is the main idea. It's so simple. Okay. So this is on the x-axis, you have the relevant phenotype. I'll describe for you 2 functions. This is the Roy model component of this entire construct. So here is the relevant phenotype. So you can have the genetic part, the phenotype. You can be here, you can be here, you can be here, okay? And there is a distribution of the population of this phenotype. And now there is this, which is the productivity, think of it, productivity of foraging. And this is the productivity of farming. And the idea is the more productive you are more likely you are to have children, okay? And these 2 technologies coexist in principle. So if you are here, you have the choice between this productivity, if you choose farming, or this productivity, if you choose foraging. So you will choose foraging. Up to here, and then if you are here, you have this productivity if you choose foraging, you have this productivity if you choose farming, so you choose the maximum of the 2. That's the Roy part. So the fitness function is really this. You agree? So that's the idea. And what happened 12,000 years ago, that's the hypothesis. I'm suggesting a hypothesis. I'm going to test it. Is that this was before the warming up. Productivity of agriculture was shifted to the right, but low. Climate change happens. It may raise this, it may raise this, but raises this, the farming more than this. We end up here. And now we are here. Okay. Now the process I was describing earlier is saying, let me do the sequence of what happens. This is the proof by picture. If you see the distribution of this, you will see that the phenotype is concentrated around them. It's a normal with variance that depends on the population, concentrated around this point. So it's about something like this. So you don't escape to this. The key thing is that if someone mutates and goes here, you will be better at farming, but this pool is not enough. When you go here, you will suddenly, that's the point where it looks like there are two invariant distribution. You may stay here, or very quickly you go to a normal distribution concentrated around this point, again with variance that depends on the population. Is that clear? More or less? No? Okay. So actually, if you simulate it, this is what happens when omega is small. So it stays around here. If you increase, depends on, if you increase and increase very much, you quickly go to the other position. If you increase but not too much, you go there, but much slower. Does it help? I'm creating for you the stochastic process that will allow me to estimate the probability distribution. How am I doing? Is it complicated? Good. So one way is to approximate it in continuous time model. You can take that complicated process, estimate, make the continuous time approximation. Yep. Yeah. This. I mean, this is standard, you can do it. The crucial thing is that you have the omega times the beta that appears here. So once you do the continuous time approximation, as you are saying, you get this process. If I ignore for the moment the variance part, you get this ordinary differential equation. You can solve as a simple solution exponential, and that gives you a rough idea of how the process evolves. The question that you were asking, the difference between different fitness functions. Suppose you are here, okay? What is relevant? Okay, let's say that you are at a distribution that you have here. What is relevant here at this point, when the population is concentrated here, is the derivative of this function. You will I mean, you can compute it explicitly, but you see what the only thing that matters locally is the derivative of the fitness function at the point. So whether here you have this or the linear interpolation is the same thing. So for practical purposes, you are looking always at the directional selection mode. So you can then estimate this model as the solution of this ordinary differential equation plus a random term with variance that depends on the frequency. This is not mysterious, right? This term forces you to stay in the unit interval because when this approach is either 0 or 1, this term vanishes. And the approximation is pretty good. So if you compare the distribution in the full model and in the simple model, these are the means. The variances are different. Okay, so the approximation is good. The bottom line is that you can use a nonlinear least squares model estimation, where the expectation has this form and the variance has this form. You can do, now at this point, you can use it, you can do it in Stata and check whether the parameter omega is significantly different from 0, and it is. So it turns out to be this number. This number doesn't mean anything. The only relevant thing is that it's highly significant and positive compared to the standard error. Okay, so you could stop here if you believe the approximation, and you should because of this, and say that the omega, just in the conclusion, the omega is significantly positive. There was a selection that it was operating in the direction of alleles that were favorable to farming.
So we are only concerned with the drift part of this model, right? We are ignoring the volatility.
It's an approximation, right? So we are testing in a simplified model. In a simplified model, the hypothesis that omega is positive, and to tell you that is significantly positive, I need to produce a variance for you, and the continuous time approximation does that. Is that clear?
Thank you.
So the deterministic part, the ODE, gives you what omega has to be in size. The variance term is telling you whether it's significant or not, and also gives you an estimate of the population size. This model has two parameters, the intensity of the selection process and the population size. Okay, I don't want to overdo the technical part. You can do this in the simple model. You can do it using the full model through simulation-based inference. The bottom line is that you get exactly the same answer. So, okay, here, just to give you an idea, here is, so as I told you, we have two parameters, the omega, which is the strength of the selection, and the population size. And you can compute, for instance, the distance of the phenotype observed from the phenotype predicted by the model. And there's two important qualities. It's almost independent from the population size, because the population size only affects the variance, and has a minimum exactly at 0.04. Here is 30 because I didn't translate, but this corresponds to the omega equal 4 percentage point. Again, 4 doesn't mean anything, okay? It's only the fact that it's significantly different from 0. And it's really nicely shaped. You can test directly the null hypothesis. So you can put omega equal to 0. Now you have a model. It gives you a prediction on the distribution of the phenotype. This is with a population ridiculously small, 1,000. This is a population with 11,000. So the crucial thing is we start 5.8. We have to reach 6.4 within 560 generations. Can you do it with omega equal to 0? No way. If the population size is larger, it's even harder, because the law of large numbers now is pushing you to stay at 5.8 if omega is 0. You can do kernel density of different, this is the same. Here you get the estimate of the optimal omega that maximizes the likelihood, is concentrated slightly around 0.04 as the model predicts. Okay, we can discuss this more technical details, but the conclusion is this. Okay, let's step back. So what have we done? We have done the following. we define change in a population as change in the distribution of alleles. We formulated an hypothesis that this change in the distribution of alleles is really the change that occurs after a climate change that made farming more productive than foraging. The allocation of the population between foraging and farming changed because foraging was less productive than farming. And human species underwent this a similar transformation that what happens to dogs, changing from wolves to dogs. Okay, you change the distribution of alleles in a population. Important that the speed of the selection is in scale with the observed phenomena. So I'm not making up, oh, it takes a lot of time. I have 560 generations available, and the parameters of the model are those that biology gives me. And I have to explain a change of the phenotype that in our normalized quantity goes from 5.8 to 6.3. The model gives me the variance and the likelihood that this happens by chance with no selection. That is impossible. Have I answered your question? I was.
But it's still a factor because adoption, so your argument is essentially higher productivity.
Yeah.
Automatically, the society will adopt that. But whereas we already know that the adoption of technology is, depends on many factors, including the institutional. So whether the technology was adopted because of higher productivity or because of institutional structure or for some other reason, it's still not clear to me.
Yeah,
so
no,
it still remains a plan.
I completely agree. So let's be concrete. Let's be concrete. I'll give you another. So I want to distinguish two things that I am saying and I might be saying. The only thing I'm saying is that a change from foraging to farming was associated with the shift in the selection that was favoring alleles that are educational attainment enhancing. The way in which it happens, I don't know. So I'll give you another possible. So one possible explanation is the one that was hinting at, which is that farming becomes more productive because of climate change. Okay? I can make up another story, which from the data I have available is almost as credible and is purely institutional. Okay? And it's this following story. With farming, you may have concentrated population more than with foraging. I mean, in a square miles, you can produce enough output to feed a much larger population than you do with foraging. Okay? So society becomes more concentrated. So social interaction is much more frequent. This social interaction somehow increases the fertility of people. That's it's an alternative explanation. I'll call it institutional. I'm not saying this is impossible. This is possibly either an important part of the explanation or the explanation itself. I don't know. The only thing that I can say for sure is that associated with this climate change in the same period, there was a shift in the selection that cannot be zero. Okay, maybe it operated through pure technological, maybe it operated through institutional. The point is that it changed the distribution of alleles in the population. We end up with a different population. Is it clear about what I'm saying? So this you can, but okay, go ahead.
Can you predict the distribution of alleles henceforth?
The distribution of alleles?
What will happen henceforth?
Oh,
Right?
So the answer is sure. If I believe something which so total fertility rate in Italy is now 1.27. The law of fertility has completely changed in the meantime. So yeah, if I believed that being richer makes you have more children, I could do, but do you believe that? I don't, do you? So I'm just saying, for cultural reasons, women now refuse to have children because it's a painful, time-consuming, risky job, and women seem not to want to do that. Isn't this so? Selection process has changed completely. So yeah, mechanically I could, but the selection, the fitness function has changed. I think in fact it's inversely related to, because it's inversely related, fertility is inversely related to income because it's inversely related to education.
Coming back to the same point that if the culture and norms and institution changes our selection process, then we are back to the same story. It's not, the biological determinism altogether.
No, we are not, okay. No, wait a minute. I'm not stupid. I know institutions matter. Of course. I'm just saying institutions work in a different way than Carlito Marx thought. It's just because he had no clue. But now we have a clue. So we can't repeat the same mistake. Is this a fair assessment? Yeah, so I mean, I know that now, I know that the relationship between fertility and income is probably the opposite of what used to be. The relationship, I'm saying something which is really irritating people. The relationship between intelligence and fertility among women has changed. Higher intelligence women are less likely to have children. I have papers documenting this. People don't like this, but that's a fact. So as the fitness function has completely changed. I'm not stupid, I realize that.
Aldo, one quick question. So in one of the introductory slides, you talked about the puzzle and its explanation in terms of the standard repeated game version, right? So if you had taken out climate change from the equation, then that logic stands, right? So it cannot be true. Is that a right way of saying things?
Yeah, look, the climate change is circumstantial evidence.
No, true. So if you take it away, then the standard explanation.
Which is the standard explanation?
The one that you offered in the opening slide regarding prisoner's dilemma repeated.
Yeah, so that
the puzzle. That would say that this would have happened irrespective whether there was a climate change or not, right?
I mean, the logic of that explanation is impeccable. Is it theorems, therefore is it tautology? Of course it's true. I'm just saying, theorems that are right in the sense that they are consistent are not necessarily right in the sense that explain a fact. Right. So I think that the Rothorn is one of my personal mates. I like the guy. But the fact that he has an interest in observation might very well have nothing to do with reality. So, yeah, the climate change, I think it was important. I think, if ex post reconstructing all this, I think most of the change came from the different productivity after climate change. Is not only because I think it, but because the archaeological evidence is clear. The Natufians, there was an early warming up period, about 14,000 before. So people already started not to go to farming, but they went to a smart foraging. So they were much better in storing technology. So they were not yet producing seeds, but they were storing it better. So every time you see this tendency to shift from foraging to farming when the climate improves, So I think on the basis of these and many million other facts, I think the change in productivity is the most likely explanation. Maybe also the fact that now you live in a society. So, for instance, language, he was asking me, language is important. Yeah, probably language. Of course, language is more important when there are 500 people in a small village rather than 2. Yes, so language also, but all these are accessories. What I'm saying, the biological fact is that as a species, we changed a bit. Is that an answer? This is important, man.
But I just wanted to summarize like this slide and that slide. How do the two connect? I think
Okay. Thank you for your patience. Any other questions? I made you suffer enough? Yes.
So, if we look at the history of last 10, 14,000 years, within that historical span, most profound economic and demographic, most profound economic and population related changes have happened in last 200 to 300 years. So in terms of population and also per capita income.
Oh, the last 200-300 years.
Last 200-300 years. It seems like, so my question is, do you observe genetic changes more pronounced in last, say, 300 years compared to the rest of this historical span? Or this is too short a period to say anything with any amount of certainty?
Yes, thank you. So this is a crucial question, right? Because that's really why I studied this stuff. Who cares about what happened 14,000 years ago? What lessons can we derive to estimate what happens in the next, in the last 300 and in the next 100 years? This is what I'm going to say is my hunch. There's going to be a profound genetic transformation because there is a differential fertility across groups and across characteristics. So I think we are going to see a profound transformation of the genotype distribution of the size that we have seen 14,000 years ago. The direction is going to be completely different because as I was mentioning earlier, the direction in which selection operates now is completely different. So, I mean, I really, these are very dangerous topics. So I don't want to say anything that on which I don't have data. But for instance, the association between fertility and intelligence, I think is fertility and intelligence. I think is important, and it's very hard to say something about it because people don't like what one can say. So, thank you. Very interesting topic. One has to go with extreme care because God knows what people throw at you. Yeah. Eugenics. Thank you. No, come on. I mean, Daniel, you can ask questions privately, but okay.
For instance, what that we may have in between the last is the migration patterns. For instance.
What?
Migration patterns.
Yep. So yes, that's another. That's something. Yeah. So the genotype was changed because of about 6,000 years ago in migration from the from the east. So there is that component too. We ignore this here. We just want to highlight migration is obviously likely to be even more important for us in the future. Yes, migration, I'm just saying, yes, point taken. We ignore it for simplicity, has been certainly important, is probably going to be more important in the future. Am I answering you? No? No, you wanted to add something.
Okay, so, I mean, what I see in this particular exercise is, when you make this simpler narrative, explain the phenomenon of changing of the distribution of types.
Yeah.
That already predicts that it gives me significant changes.
Maybe, wait a minute, not necessarily, right? May or may not. Depends on
Yeah,
what
so-
the data say. Yeah. You agree that that omega could have turned out to be negative?
Yeah.
I mean-
Yeah.
I mean, it's the data, no? Okay.
I agree. I agree to that. The thing is, as you again pointed out in response to Anirban's question, is there can be several other narratives as well, which can be tested, not necessarily this one, right?
Yes. So, wait, yes. It's complicated, right? So you have to analyze different layers and then eventually you put everything together. Migration, as I said, migration is an important part. I want to say, okay, let's analyze first what happens from the point of view of selection. By the way, migration was also produced. The spread of agriculture from the Fertile Crescent to the rest of Europe was in part genetic change and was in part migration itself. I mean, people were migrating in the northwest direction. So that's certainly is part of the equation. I'm trying to identify efforts acting. Look, I completely agree with you, but you must agree with me that we have to go one step at a time.
I want to know a bit more about the data source actually. Is it only the European data and the fertile crescent data, or?
Yeah, we look at European data, yes.
Okay, but probably you also data may be available for say Egypt or the Indus Valley civilization or China, these places.
Yes, but no, we don't know because nobody has. I mean, most of the genetic information that we have now is coming from population of European descent because that is where the analysis of the genome has progressed. So that's the population for which we have information. By the way, it's known that you can't export, you can't use the same coefficients. And that's
So, so I just want to ask it that, so there was a climate change and so I know the channels. So do we have a data on just the distribution of technological change, geographic distribution, where it happened most? Like where the technological adoption was it Europe area or some other places like?
Yes.
And if there is some geographic dimension, what explains that? So is that in institutions or is it something else?
So what we know is that hunter-gatherers basically disappeared in the space of 3,000 years. And the evidence that we have was a transformation of the technology widely used from foraging to farming in those space. So the whole thing was over in 3,000 years. So the speed, as I said, the speed was 1 kilometer per year. So you have to cover 3,000 miles. And we have evidence that there was an associated transformation of the technology.
So was it concentrated in some part of world or so? So where was this technological adoption more concentrated? So some geographic dimension.
What do you mean more concentrated? Oh, no, the fact that it went from the south to the north, basically. So it goes from east to west because that's how Europe is. From south to north because the gradient of the climate change was there. If the temperature is immediately felt in the Fertile Crescent and then slowly progress. So the gain from the climate change was smaller as you go north. That's my interpretation.
Just one quick response. Since you had initiated with the Marx conjecture, then you explain the biological process, and you also explain that institution may matter. Now, given these kind of results you found, now where do you want to put this result in the context of the dialectics of nature's three fundamental laws given by Engels? I mean, do you think this is supporting the fundamental laws, or
What is the
contesting?
fundamental law that you
The
have
three
in mind?
fundamental laws: the negation of negation, quantity to quality change, and
Oh, the quantity to quality change. You know the quantity to quality? You know this thing of the quantity to quality? Again. So I think the only thing I'm objecting to the Marxist reconstruction and what we were discussing. So in the intermission, we were discussing about the last citation I had of Marx. And so one interesting possibility could be, oh, look, a change from maybe a change from a humanity in which someone fishes, someone hunts, someone does the critical, may or maybe induced by a change in the genotype. That's a possibility. So that's in fact, I am basically saying humanity changed from hunting to farming. I'm just saying that was not a cultural change, was a genetic change. So again, Marx had no idea that this was occurring, but I'm not saying, oh, Marx, you should have known, because he couldn't, but now we can't be ignoring this. What is this being anyway? Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
An announcement, the lunch is a bit delayed, so just hang around a little bit and continue with Aldo. And those who have presentations at 2, I'll request all of you to go to your respective rooms right away. The student volunteers are going to help you to set up your presentation so that you can come back and have lunch afterwards. Thank you so much. And sorry for the inconvenience.
The invited presenters, you might have